Hi guys, it's Roy from Bellos 3D here again with another Blender video. And in the first video of this short two-part series, I will be creating a jam jar in Blender, which in the next video I'll be taking into Substance Painter to give it a lick of paint. So without much more to do, let's get to the modelling. Okay, so here we are in Blender, and the method I'm going to use for this model today is high poly to low poly baking. And what that means is I'm going to take a high poly model and I'm going to bake the normal directions from the geometry of the high poly model onto a low poly model's texture, so that I can have less geometry on the actual model, but the texture will make it look like the high poly model. So let's get started by deleting the cube. Delete the cube and Shift A, create a cylinder. I'm going to go into front view and I'm going to right click and shade smooth. And as you can see down in the corner here, you'll see my keys as I press them. Shading's not very good on that, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go to the data properties tab, go to normals and click auto smooth. I'm going to bump that up to 50. That's about a safe number. Right, into edit mode with tab. I'm just going to move it up on the Z axis 1 meter. So G, Z to restrict it to the Z axis, and 1. And that's about all I need for sizing. I think that's going to be about the right size. It's 2 meters tall in like game engine size, but for this stage of things, up to painting it and everything, it doesn't matter about the scale. So let's take a look at our model, and I think I'm going to need to select the top there with 3 to go into face mode and select that. And I think we need a little shoulder on that, so let's press E and right click to leave it in place. I'm going to just GZ move it up a little bit, and I'd say about 10 centimeters. That should do it. I'm just going to scale that in slightly, and then I'm going to extrude it all the way back up to about here. Okay, so that gives us the neck or shoulder of our jam jar. What I want now is, before the lid, I need a little lip where the lid pushes against when you twist the lid on. So let's press E and right click again and just scale it out just a tiny little bit. And then E again, just bring it up about so far, I would say. Maybe a little bit bigger, about there. And again, let's move the viewport round. E, right click and scale to bring it in. And then E to bring it up just a touch. Don't need a lot on this, just a little touch. And then back into front orthographic, and we'll zoom in a little bit to give it a bit of detail. And we press E, right click, scale, bring it out to about the width of the whole jar. And then again, E, bring it up, and about there should do it. Maybe about there. Okay, so we have the general shape of the jar. Let's give it a little bit more definition. And we're going to do that by beveling all of the edges. I mean, it's a very simple, very basic model. It doesn't need a lot of detail in it. So let's go 2 to go into edge mode, and I'll click this edge. We can press Control and B, and let's just scroll up a few times, give it a nice smooth edge. The amount of geometry you use in this really doesn't matter as long as your machine can handle it, because we're not actually using this model for the final model. So you can put as much detail into this as you want. And as you can see, it's a nice smooth edge there. Let's give this edge another bevel as well. Control B and bring it out. Don't need quite so much of a bevel. Whoops. There we go. There. And let's give that a nice little shape there. Now we want that to be quite sharp in there, but what this bit here, let's select them 2 edge loops. Control B and let's bring them out. I want to bring them all close together so that all roughly average the same width. Height along here. There we go, and that rounds it off, gives it a nice round shape on that. Let's do the shoulder. Let's take this 2 and Control B, and again let's bring them together. I don't think I need any more loops than that. I think that'll be enough, and that gives it a nice little, the neck or the shoulder of the jar as it usually is. And I think maybe no, that will be fine, I think. Maybe the bottom of it we could do with some rounding down the bottom as well. Control B, and let's bring it out just a little bit, just a touch. And there we go. And that's the main shape of our jar. So let's also give it a little bit definition where the label's going to be, because the label's never flush to the jar. It's paper that's glued to the jar, so there's always a tiny little lip. So I want to give it that little lip. So let's Control R scroll up once, left click and right click, press S and Z and bring it out. Press 3 to go into face select, and Alt and left click on this line here to select the ring around. And then what we can do is we can extrude along the face normals by pressing Alt and E, extrude face along normals. And what that does is if you go up, it pulls it out. If you go down, it pulls it in. It just brings it out along the normals direction for each of the faces instead of the global direction for the whole scene. So let's just bring it out just only a tiny little bit. We don't need a lot. And about there should do it. And we now have the high poly model for our jam jar. Let's work on the low poly model. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go into a front orthographic view, and I'm going to rename this cylinder as jar underscore high for high poly. And then I'm going to press Shift and A, and I'm going to create another cylinder. But this time we don't need as much geometry, and before we move it, we need to reduce that geometry. So let's take a look. I think we can probably get away with 14, maybe 16 vertices. I think that would be about right. And we'll leave it as an n-gon, and all the rest of it we'll leave the same. I'm going to shade smooth and turn on auto smoothing exactly the same as before. And then we need to go into edit mode, and we're doing exactly the same thing as before, except we're not adding any extra geometry to this. This is going to be very simple, very basic. GZ and 1 to take that up to the top. In face mode, I'm going to select the top, and I'm going to go E, and I'm going to bring it up all the way there. And I'm just going to press Shift Z so I can see the wireframe. And I'm going to press, let's see, Control R, and I'm going to put an edge loop in here. I'm going to put an edge loop in about here. And I'm going to select this edge loop, if I can find the edge, all the way along there. I'm going to press S, and I want to exclude the Z axis, so press Shift and Z. And then I can just bring that in so that it's tight into about there. And I think I might want to bring that top edge in again a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, press Shift Z to bring it back out. As you can see, it's not perfectly flush to everything, but it's close enough. And I've got the top selected. E, right click, scale it out, and E, bring it up. Now I still want to bevel this top edge, so I'm going to press Control B, but I only need to put maybe 2 edge loops in there. I don't need as much geometry for that edge loop. And I think I might have to bring out this here. So let's take a look at that. Let's go into wireframe, Shift Z. I think if I put Control R, 2 loops in there, and then S and exclude the Z and just bring them out like so. That should give me enough shape for that. And as you can see, the low poly model is 348 tries, whereas the high poly model is 2,492 tries. And that's our geometry so far. Let's move them along. And as you can see on here, you can see the difference. You've got the high poly here with all the detail and the low poly here. But once we copy the normals over from this one to this one, you won't notice the difference. Now, before we move on to Substance Painter, I need to rename and prepare the models for masking and painting in Substance Painter. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do in Substance Painter is I'm going to use colour masks, colour ID masks, so that I can mask off areas of the jar, so I can put the label on and make the lid different material. And to do that, I need to create the colour ID mask in Blender on the high poly model. And I do that using Vertex Paint. So let's zoom in on my high poly model. I'm going to go into edit mode and press 3 to go into face mode, and alt click to select this loop, +1 so we can get the bit around the edge, And then I'm going to Shift and H to hide everything else. So we just got that piece. Now if I go up to where it says edit mode up in the corner, I can then choose vertex paint. And what I want to do is then next to that, it should have faces and vertexes. Click on the vertexes, and everything that I'd hidden in edit mode is now gone. So if I now press Shift and Z to go into wireframe mode, you can see all of the vertices. And now you just paint the vertices. So I'm going to go over to my tool tab here, and I've already been playing around with this, so I've already changed it to green. This would normally be white. I'm going to select my green. I'm going to change that to red. I'm going to simply make sure my strength is up to 1 and my radius of my brush is quite high. And I'm just going to paint all of those vertices. Now you can't see it at the moment because we're in wireframe mode, but if I press Shift Z, now the whole thing is red. And just want to make sure we go round and that we've got all of the vertices, every single one of them. Because if you don't get all of the vertices, when you create the mask in Substance Painter, it misses pieces out and you get little patches that don't get painted, and it's pretty damned annoying. Right, so I think we have all of these, just make sure, and it's good to go around. Even if it looks perfect, it's good to go around and just make sure, just in case. Okay, so let's go back into edit mode, and what we're going to do is deselect that with double tapping A and then press Alt and H. So when you hit Control and I to invert the selection, and we'll hide that label, and we can now select this top face and just press Control plus a number of times until we've selected all of the jar lid, and I think that should be about right. So let's Shift H and hide everything else, and we're just working on the lid. Let's go to vertex paint, and as you can see we have the lid separated. We want to do this in a different color, so I'm going to go back to the green for this one, and just going to paint all of the vertices that we can see visible on the screen, every single one of them. You just go around all of them and underneath as well, and just make sure you get every single one so you don't get any artifacts when you're painting later on. I think that has got it. I don't see any issues. Okay, let's press tab to go back into edit mode. I'm going to deselect that and press Alt and H and deselect everything. So let's see what we can do. We're going to select that and Control plus, hide it, select that again, same as we did before. Control plus, hide that, and this is the jar itself. Let's go into vertex paint mode, and you can see all of the bits here. Press Shift Z, I'm going to go into wireframe. No, not Shift Z, I'm going to do Alt Z for X-ray mode. I'm going to change this to blue, and I'm going to start painting. Doesn't seem to want to paint it. Why is that? For some reason that's not working. It's because in edit mode you need to have everything selected. That's it. My fault. I will leave that in the video so that you can see my mistake and learn from it. I'm not afraid to hide my mistake, and that was a teachable lesson for me because I never realised that it had to be selected in edit mode when you're painting vertices. I didn't know that. So there we are. I think we've got everything on there. Let's turn off X-ray mode. And yeah, I think, oh, maybe we missed a couple there, see? Just a couple there. And just got to make sure we've got all of them. I mean, this will probably be hidden because the lid will be on top of it. Let's get that. Right, okay, I think that's done. Let's go back into edit mode, Alt and H. And now, if I was to go back into vertex paint, you see the 3 different colours. And that, when it's taken into Substance Painter, will become a colour ID map, which is basically a texture with those 3 colours on. And you can use that as a mask for your painting. Okay, let's go back to object mode. I'm going to rename this one as jar high. Sorry, jar low for our low poly. And next I need to unwrap the low poly jar. So let's go into our UV editing tab, and with our low poly jar selected into edit mode, let's take a look-see. And I think I'm just going to quickly just add Control B, a quick bevel to the bottom of there. Doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to, nope. Control B, it only needs to be one little chamfer there, just to give it a little bit of geometry to add the normals to. I think that should work fine. Right, so let's take a look at what we got. I'm going to select this edge there and this edge here. No, this edge here. Control E and mark seams. And around the, I think on the side, I'm going to press Alt and left click and take that whole side seam. Control E, mark seams. Looks about right to me. And then let's select that whole edge there and that whole edge there. Control E and mark seams. And I'm just trying to get this to come out as neat as possible. So I think we're going to have to... I think we'll be able to do that. So I press A, U and unwrap. And it's not perfect. It's not great at the moment. But let's select this one. Maybe this one. Yeah. Little trick for straightening out the UVs and giving them a bit more shape. Take a nice straight looking square, select it so that it's the active quad, right click, follow active quads, and you can see that straightens them out a little bit. And it's still not quite right, so that's obviously not perfectly straight. So I'm going to press 2 to go into edge mode, select the top edge, S, Y and 0, and bottom edge, S, Y and 0, and both of the side edges is S, X and 0, and it moves a little bit, S, X and 0. Now press 3 and select that face again and active quads, and there we go, that's nice and straight there. You can see that's nice and perfectly straight. And we'll do the same with this piece as well. Okay, so that's nice and straight. Let's select everything else. And yeah, I think we can straighten this bit up a bit as well. Okay, so let's see if we can fit this into this thing. It's going to need to come around. So I'm going to select everything and I'm going to take a look, because what I want to do is R minus 90. Bring it down. I just need to scale it all down so that it fits. Let's package average island scale. There we go. That's better. Basically, what it is when I changed that topology by following the active quads, it stretched it out a little bit. So by going to UV and average island scale, it's brought it back down. Okay, so let's just bring it all into the center here, and I think that's probably the best we're going to get out of it. We could probably make a lot more use of the area, but overall, I think if we select everything and go up here, change it to individual origins, we can press S and scale it out. But I think that's about the best we're going to get. And that's a pretty good unwrap, that. So I'm happy with that. So let's now export these out so that we can use them in Substance Painter. So the first one we're going to do is the high poly. So select the high poly, go to File, Export FBX. Right, and in the folder that we've chosen, I'm going to change that to jar underscore high. And I'm going to make sure selected objects are selected. Nothing else needs to be changed for the Substance Painter file. It may need to be changed if you take it into an engine, game engine. But for Substance Painter, we don't need to change any of this. So let's export FBX. And we've now got our FBX in our folder. So we now need to hide that. Click on the low poly, bring that back to the center with Alt G. Make sure the low poly is selected. Go to File, Export, FBX. Everything's all set for us. We just need to change the name. And we change that to low. And hit export. And we now exported our model, ready to be painted in Substance Painter. Okay, so that's where we finish for this video. In the next part, I will be taking these models into Substance Painter and giving them some textures. I hope you enjoyed this video and hope you learned something. If you did, like and subscribe, share with your friends, it all helps. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.